Sinking American ships, falling aircraft, kamikaze attacks, an assault the US Navy never expected. Japanese planes were quite literally flying to their deaths, and American commanders were stunned. October 1944, Philippines. American landing ships lie anchored off the coast of Leyte Island as soldiers begin coming ashore. General Douglas MacArthur steps onto the beach and speaks words that will echo through history. "I have returned." But this was more than a symbolic return. It marked the breaking of Japan's final defensive line in the Pacific, and the Japanese knew it. The Imperial Japanese Navy committed all its remaining strength to Leyte Gulf. What followed would become the largest naval battle in history, fought on 4 separate fronts, involving hundreds of ships and tens of thousands of men. But there was one critical difference. Japan could no longer win in the air. The air power it had lost in the Philippine Sea was gone for good. There were no experienced pilots left, no effective coordination, no air superiority. So how do you win a naval battle without control of the skies? This was the question facing Japanese commanders. And they made a decision that would not change the outcome of the war, but would change the nature of warfare itself. Because this decision marked the birth of the kamikaze. This video tells the story of that decision. But keep this in mind, kamikaze was not madness. It was the logical consequence of a lost air war. Having been defeated in the sky, Japan chose a new path at sea and in the mind. In the following sections, you will see that Japan lost not only ships at Leyte Gulf, but the war itself. And in that acceptance of defeat, one of the most ruthless tactics in history was born. How did this tactic emerge? What did American sailors feel when they faced these attacks for the first time? And did kamikaze truly change the course of the war? You'll discover the answers to these questions as the story unfolds. By October 1944, Japan knew it could no longer win the war, but it also refused to accept defeat. This contradiction pushed Japanese commanders into a corner. What did they have left, and what could they still do with it? After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Japanese air power had effectively collapsed. Aircraft carriers had been sunk. Experienced pilots were gone. Newly trained pilots were inexperienced, their training incomplete, and the chances of a conventional air attack succeeding against American radar systems were now virtually non-existent. The numbers were brutal. The probability of a Japanese aircraft even reaching an American ship was less than 5%. If it did reach the fleet, the chance of accurately delivering its bomb was only about 1 to 2%. In other words, out of every 100 aircraft, maybe 1 or 2 would hit their target. The rest would be shot down or miss entirely. Japanese commanders understood this math very clearly. If conventional attack methods were this ineffective, then another solution had to be found. And that is when a grim idea emerged. What if the pilot did not return? The concept of kamikaze did not come from a single individual. It was discussed among multiple officers and gradually took shape. But the man who ultimately turned it into an official tactic was Admiral Takejiro Onishi. After the Battle of the Philippine Sea, Onishi was appointed commander of Japanese air forces in the Philippines. His first step was to assess reality. How many aircraft were available? How many pilots? Were there escorts? Was coordination working? The answers were bleak. Aircraft existed, but pilots were scarce. There were no effective escorts. Coordination was broken, and the American fleet was overwhelmingly strong. During a meeting, Onishi stated, "If our pilots cannot reach the target, then we must turn them into the target." The room fell silent, because everyone understood that this idea could not be taken back. The word kamikaze means divine wind in Japanese. It refers to the typhoons that destroyed Mongol invasion fleets in the 13th century. The term carried deep spiritual and cultural significance. And now, that name was being assigned to a new method of warfare. So did the pilots accept this mission? Yes, but the reason was not simple fanaticism as it is often portrayed. Japanese pilots lived under immense social pressure. Honor, loyalty to the emperor, family expectations, and the cultural ideal of not fearing death all played a role. These values made acceptance easier. But there was another, harsher reality. Most pilots already believed they were unlikely to survive conventional attacks. Their chances of returning were slim either way. At least in a kamikaze mission, their deaths would have meaning. They would reach the target. The success rate would be 100%, not 1%. Kamikaze was not born from hope. It was born from statistics. This idea would be implemented in an organized form for the first time at Leyte Gulf. Japan was prepared to risk everything to stop the American landings, and that everything now included pilots themselves. On October 23, 1944, the battle began. Japanese forces approached Leyte Gulf from 4 directions: the Philippine Sea, the Surigao Strait, Cape Engano, the waters off Samar. Combat erupted everywhere. The American Navy was powerful. Aircraft carriers, battleships, radar systems, all functioning effectively. Japanese ships were hit one after another. The super battleship Musashi was sunk by American air attacks. The Japanese Southern Force was destroyed in the Surigao Strait. But Japan did not give up. Because one final card remained: kamikaze. On the morning of October 25th, the first organized kamikaze unit took off. The unit was called Shimpu. 5 aircraft, 5 pilots. Their target? American aircraft carriers. American radar detected them immediately. Fighter aircraft scrambled. But this time, something was different. The Japanese pilots did not turn away. American pilots opened fire. The Japanese aircraft were hit. Smoke poured from their fuselages, but they did not fall. Instead, they kept coming straight toward the ships. At that moment, American pilots realized something chilling. These men were not trying to survive. So how do you stop a pilot who wants to die? You don't. You either kill him in the air, or you let him crash. And that is how the first kamikaze strike occurred. A Japanese aircraft slammed into the American escort carrier. The explosion tore through the deck. Fires erupted. Within hours, the ship sank. This was not just the loss of a vessel, it was the announcement of an entirely new kind of warfare. The crew on the deck of the USS St. Lo was thrown into panic. The explosion was so sudden and so violent that, at first, no one could fully grasp what had happened. A plane had crashed. Yes. But was it an accident? Or was it deliberate? The answer became clear within minutes. A second aircraft appeared, then a third, all doing the same thing, diving straight toward the ship. American gunners opened fire with everything they had. Aircraft were hit, torn apart in midair, but some still made it through, because the pilots were already prepared to die. Even when damaged, the planes kept coming. An American officer shouted over the radio, "They're not turning back! They're deliberately crashing!" This was something entirely new for the US Navy. They had faced every form of attack: torpedoes, bombs, submarines. But this was different. This was a human being turning himself into a weapon. As the St. Lo went down, other ships came under attack as well. USS Santee, USS Suwannee, USS Kalinan Bay. All were struck by kamikaze aircraft. Some survived with damage. Others were left crippled, barely afloat. American commanders were stunned, because this tactic made traditional defenses feel almost meaningless. Radar worked. Fighters scrambled. Anti-aircraft guns fired. But when a pilot was willing to die, none of it guaranteed a stop. It only bought time. One American admiral wrote in a report, "We do not know how to fight this tactic. The enemy is not afraid of death. This is beyond the kind of war we understand." This was psychological warfare. And at Leyte Gulf, Japan had introduced it to the Pacific. By the end of the war, Japan would lose most of its remaining ships. But the kamikaze attacks left a deep and lasting mark on the American Navy. Because from that moment on, everyone understood one thing clearly. This war was fought not only with steel and fire, but in the mind as well. After Leyte Gulf, the Japanese Navy was effectively finished. Its major surface ships were destroyed. Its air power was gone. Supply lines were severed. Japan could no longer wage an offensive war at sea. But it had set something in motion: kamikaze. This tactic did not change the outcome of the war, but it made the fighting far bloodier and far more brutal. In the months that followed, thousands of kamikaze attacks were carried out at Okinawa, Iwo Jima, and in the waters surrounding Japan. Hundreds of American ships were damaged or sunk, and thousands of sailors lost their lives. For Japan, kamikaze was an act of desperation. For the United States, it became the psychological dimension of the war. American sailors now feared not only enemy aircraft, but the enemy's intent, because stopping a pilot who was prepared to die was nearly impossible. When Japan surrendered at the end of the war, the kamikaze attacks stopped as well. But the mark left by this tactic remained etched into the history of warfare. Leyte Gulf had revealed a grim reality. When options disappear, human beings themselves can become weapons. Perhaps the most important lesson of Leyte Gulf is this: wars are not decided by technology, firepower, or strategy alone. They are also shaped by psychology, morale, and desperation. And sometimes, the losing side finds new and unexpected ways to fight. At Leyte Gulf, Japan did not simply lose ships, it accepted defeat. And that acceptance gave birth to one of the most ruthless tactics in history. In the next video, we'll examine the Battle of Okinawa, the moment when kamikaze tactics reached their peak. Because Leyte Gulf was only the beginning. The real story came after.